Okay, good morning,
Good morning.
and thanks for being here. My name is Evan Weiner. My background is radio and TV and newspapers and magazines, but I never worked in Westchester County and out of any of those fields, but I live here. Mary Queen of Scots, she played golf, and this is women in sports, and it's not what you think it is. It's about struggles that women had to be accepted, whether that was in the United States or whether that was in England or globally. Mary Queen of Scots played golf. We don't know what she did on the golf course, but after all, she was the queen, right? So she might have, fixed it up a little bit that she looked good. Yes.
What was the golf then?
Golf then probably looked similar to what it is now. Somebody hitting a ball into a
No,
hole.
they had cricket
Yeah,
before.
they had
or-
cricket also in
Yeah.
that neck of the woods. I don't know how many of you have heard of Gertrude Ederle. She was a swimmer. She did the English Channel swim. Babe Dietrichson was the best athlete, according to the Associated Press, women athlete of the first half of the century. She also grew up in the South and liked Jim Crow, and we'll talk about that. Thea Gibson won the 1957 Wimbledon tournament, but it was a struggle for her to get onto the tennis court in invitationals. Wilma Rudolph not only overcame racism, but had polio as a kid. I love Billie Jean King. I've known Billie Jean King for a long, long, long time. She is funny, she's extremely intelligent and to the point, and we'll talk about Billie Jean King, who opened up the doors to make money for people like Serena Williams. But I'm taking over the Yonkers right now, going over the North Broadway in Yonkers. And in the 1890s, during the Gilded era, when the Vanderbilts and all of those people came through Westchester, built the railroads to Westchester, they also played golf. And this is one of the private clubs back in the 1890s, early 20th century here in Westchester. Now, I don't know how many of you go up the Sprain, make a left-hand turn, and St. Andrews Golf Course is there. That's the oldest golf course still in use in the United States. And it was built in 1897, and some of the members included Andrew Carnegie and the architect, Stanford White. Jack Nicklaus redesigned the course in 1983, and that's when I talked to Jack Nicklaus for the first time. And there are condos there, and it's a golf course today. But back in 1899, Andrew Carnegie played on that golf course. But all these guys from the Gilded Age, they had wives. And their wives were kind of limited in what they could do. Like, I want to play golf. No, you can't. Why not? We don't want you there. It's only for men. Women were not welcome. So these women had some means here in Westchester back in the day. John Reed was the first guy to play golf. He came back from Scotland with golf equipment in 1888. And they played in a little area, an apple orchard off of Route 9 and North Broadway up there. His wife, Elizabeth, wanted to play golf. They were all part of the St. Andrews women, and eventually St. Andrews would move to where they are today. So they were told, no, can't do it, can't do it. So they said, we'll show you. We have some money here. We're going to open up our own golf course on North Broadway in Yonkers. It was called the Skag Hill Country Club. It would move to a site overlooking the Hudson River, and these women, hey, it's okay. It's open to everybody. We want you to play golf. And they had, by 1896, more than 100 members, mostly women. Skag Hill Golf Course. They had men. They also did one other thing. They allowed golf on Sunday. Now, back in the 1890s, you didn't do anything on Sunday here in Westchester. So, hey, what is going on? This is heresy. You're allowing golf? Somebody's going to enjoy themselves on Sunday? Well, this is from the New York Times. Sunday golf. Can play Sunday golf. A jury at Yonkers finds player not guilty of breaking the law. Jurors congratulated on their decision. Attorney and judge have a warm tilt. I think they had a fight, but the New York Times described it as a warm tilt. Special to the New York Times. June 7th, Yonkers. In a courtroom crowded with prominent residents of the place, the question as to the right of man, not of people, the right of man, to play golf on Sunday in Yonkers was decided here 10 days by the discharge of Benjamin Adams. Mr. Adams arrested last Sunday for playing golf on the links of the Sag-Kill Golf Club. He was tried before Judge Kellogg in a jury of 6 and was discharged, but only after a hard-fought legal battle during which there was an angry exchange between Judge Kellogg and Joseph F. Daly, one of the attorneys for the defendant. The decision was received joyously by those who play baseball and the members of the Sag-Kill Golf Club, of which the defendant is a member. Because of this court case, people can play baseball on Sundays in Yonkers and also play golf. Yes?
When did they came up with the law of Black Sunday?
Blue Sunday, but going back to the Revolution.
Yeah.
Way back, founding the country, the Blue Laws.
What, the religious?
Probably.
Oh.
So, anyway, this is an Olympic tennis player in 1900. Can you see her well? She's dressed from head to toe, and she's wearing a hat. But she was in the Olympics. Baron Pierre de Coubertin was the guy who brought back the modern Olympics in 1896. And he's no fan of women in sports, absolutely no fan of women in sports. And after the 1912 Stockholm Games, he and the IOC, International Olympic Committee, his colleagues, believed an Olympiad with females would be impractical, uninteresting, unaesthetic, and improper. Women were basically not allowed in the Olympics. The funny thing today, at least in the United States on TV, is that the main drawers of the Summer Olympics, gymnastics, and the Winter Olympics is the ice skating. That's the main drawer. That's what brings people in to watch on TV. 1914, International Olympic Committee General Session made it clear, no women to participate in track and field. But, as before, allowed participation in fencing and swimming. Didn't go down well with this woman, Alice Milliet. She's from France, and she's a rower. She wants to be in the Olympics, along with a whole bunch of other women. So the women said, you know what? We'll show you. You don't want us? Hey, we'll have our own Olympics. And the women had their own Olympics. There were a total of 4 Women's Olympics, 1922 in Paris, 1926 Gothenburg, Sweden, 1930 Prague, 1934 London. And the participants came from North America and Western Europe and Japan. New York Times, 1922, covered the Women's Olympics, and this is what it said, or the newspaper writers said. 1922 was notable for the development of women athletes in all branches of competition fitting to their sex. Remarkable progress was made by them, and almost overnight, they assumed a place of great prominence in the world of athletics. World War II broke out in the United States in 1917, but World War I broke out in the United States in 1917. But World War I began in 1914 with the shooting of the Archduke in Sarajevo. Anyway, so the munitions factories sprung up in England and other places, and women were called into work. At Dick Kerr and Company, Preston, England-based locomotive and tramcar manufacturer, they converted to a munitions production plant at the outbreak of World War I in 1914. Female workers replaced the men who went off to war. And at the business, they were allowed to play soccer on the facility's grounds and showed that they really had an aptitude and an ability to play the game. Dick Kerr's ladies beat a rival factory, Arundel Courthart, 4-0 on Christmas Day, 1917. And you know what? They were so good, they got 10,000 people to watch them. 10,000 people. The men took notice. And guess what? The men weren't happy. They weren't happy that women were doing well. On Boxing Day, December 26th, the day after Christmas, 1920, 53,000 people watched Dick Kerr's ladies beat St. Helens ladies 4-0. And that really got the Football Association really upset. Hey, how could these women, the upstarts, basically outstage us? They look like they're prisoners, don't they? Dick Kerr's ladies. But this was the team that was the most popular football team in England, led by this woman, 6 foot tall Lily Parr, who swore like a sailor and smoked cigarettes while she was playing soccer. After the war, Dick Kerr's ladies played matches to raise money for the National Association of Discharged and Disabled Soldiers and Sailors. They won most of their games, and there is Lily Parr, who played for them. 1921, Dick Kerr's ladies was at the popularity peak, their popularity peak, or its popularity peak. Lily Parr was a star, and tens of thousands of fans would go to their games. They'd have about 60 games a year. Parr was the star. She started working at the company at the age of 14. She scored 43 goals the first season she played. The team was really good. They ended up playing 828 matches. They won 758. They lost only 24, drew 46. They scored about 3,500 goals, and Lily Parr scored about 1,000 of them. Something had to be done. They were too good, taking attention away from the men. Well, so what does England do? They're basically running soccer in the world. England ends women's soccer in around 1921, 1922. December 5th, 1921, after the season, the Football Association, which was the governing body for football or soccer, had enough of the women playing. The FA told women, oh, you can play soccer, but on the recreational level. That's it. And we're not going to supply any more referees to officiate women's matches. In other words, it's not ladylike, get out of here. We don't want to see you again. And there's the team, Lily Parr and the rest of the team. The FA concluded that women should not be playing football or soccer because it was quite unsuitable for females and ought not to be encouraged. They said, don't encourage anybody to play. I don't know what they wanted them to do, but they didn't want to play soccer. Oh, the FA found doctors. They found doctors who said soccer posed a physical risk for women. And to this day, that's true. But they didn't diagnose what I'm going to tell you about. A number of years ago, doctors found out that girls' soccer was hazardous to girls' health. Why? Girls have softer craniums until they're 14. And hitting the ball could cause some brain damage. It's a simple solution to that. Don't let your daughter play, or you let your daughter play, but tell her, don't let the ball hit you on the head. Don't hit the ball. The men running FA barred the women from playing at the highest level, and that would remain the policy for 5 decades. In 1969, Women's Liberation, National Organization of Women, which was Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug. And Bella Abzug, while she was Congresswoman, her chief of staff was my cousin, or actually, she was my aunt. I'm talking about my cousin. My aunt, Pearl Berkowitz, was her chief of staff on the Lower East Side. Anyway, so you got Women's Lib, 1966, National Organization for Women starts, and it spreads globally. And there are protests about all kind of things holding women back, including football. And the Women's Football Association was formed, and it was back onto the pitch for a new generation of women about 50 years after the women were kicked off the pitch. The FA bowed to pressure ended restrictions on women playing in its stadiums in 1971, and that marks the beginning of the modern age of women's soccer. Flappers, flappers, 1920s, the flappers. Hey, in the United States, white women and certain black women got a chance to vote. Asian women were not guaranteed the vote until 1952, nationally. In New York, Asian women got the vote in the 1920s, after the national vote. Fairway flapper, Edith Cummings. The flappers, get the vote, go out and work, have a good time. New age of women, the times are changing. In the early 1920s, American golf champion Edith Cummings, who you just saw, became the first female athlete on the cover of Time magazine. Gertrude Ederle proved a woman could beat a man in one of the most physically demanding swims in the world, the English Channel. How many of you read The Great Gatsby? Okay, you like it?
Yeah.
You're okay, but you liked it. Okay. There's a reason I brought this up. Edith Cummings grew up around the golf courses in Lake Forest, Illinois, outside of Chicago. One of her first tournament victories was at the age of 17. Her brother Dexter captured the intercollegiate title twice in the 1920s. 1924, Edith Cummings' victory, Women's Weston Amateur, made her famous. Time magazine featured her on the cover of its August 24th, 1924 issue. It was the first time for a female athlete. Now, what has this got to do with Great Gatsby? Nobody's asked that question. Well, I'm going to answer that question. F. Scott Fitzgerald modeled the character in The Great Gatsby, Jordan Baker, after a female golf champion. Who was that golf champion? Edith Cummings. He met her somewhere along the way through Ginevra King, who was the inspiration for Daisy Buchanan. This woman is the first American superstar athlete. Her name is Gertrude Ederle. She was born in October 1905. She learned to swim at the local New York City public pool. She was from New York City, and at New Jersey beaches. She dropped out of school when she was a teenager to swim competitively. She joined the Women's Swimming Association, won her first local competition at the age of 16. 2 years later, she made it to the Paris Olympics in 1924. She won a gold medal, 2 bronze medals, setting a world record time of 4 minutes 58.08 seconds in the relay race at the Paris event. She wanted to swim the channel between France and England. She tried to cross the English Channel in 1925, but didn't make it across the way. Her second try, 1926, she was prepared to follow the tides. This is a 19th century into the 20th century swimsuit. How'd you like to go swimming in that?
No way.
Head to toe.
I drowned.
You drown.
Yeah.
You drown.
It would pull you
Well,
in.
Gertrude Ederle did not want to wear that type of swimsuit across the English Channel. So she designed a bathing suit. Women's bathing suits resembled wool dresses with stockings and shoes when they were designed in the 19th century. No, Annette. Uh-oh. That wasn't a play. It was No, Nanette. Well, this Annette Kellerman is different. She was from Australia. She was a swimmer. And wearing skimpy suits could be illegal in 1907, at least at Boston's Revere Beach. And Boston police might have arrested Annette Kellerman for wearing a one-piece suit that showed her bare legs. There's no official record available of that. But I can tell you one thing about Annette Kellerman. She was the first woman ever to appear nude in film. Annette Kellerman. Prudes up in Boston. Anyway, banned in Boston, right? Ederle. There she is swimming the English Channel. On August 6, 1926, she's the first woman to swim the entire length of the English Channel. Only 5 men had done that before her. The challenges included quickly changing tides, 6-foot waves, frigid temperatures, and lots of jellyfish. She not only made it across, but she beat the time of the 5 men who previously did it. She swam the 35 miles in 14 and a half hours. And when she got to England, she's all cold and tired and all. And there was a guy from England asking her for her immigration papers.
Oh, wow.
They let her go. And she became a conquering hero. There she is. Do you know who got the first ticker tape parade down Broadway ever? Gertrude, for a woman, Gertrude Etherly. She got the first ticker tape parade. Returning home, 2 million people greeted her. She was the hometown girl with a ticker tape parade. Calvin Coolidge, the President of the United States. There's a great joke about Calvin Coolidge. Allegedly, he's sitting with a woman, and the woman says, "I'll bet you $5 that I can make you say 5 words." And he turned to her and said, "You lose." She gave him the $5. But anyway, three words here, sentence. America's best girl. Fame was fleeting for her, and she was forgotten after Charles Lindbergh's solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927. He got the next ticker tape parade. Babe Dietrichson was a great athlete. Probably the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century when you're talking about women. She was also a racist, and that comes into play in a few minutes. She got her nickname during Sandlot baseball games with the neighborhood boys who thought she looked like or hit like Babe Ruth. A talented basketball player in high school, she was recruited during her senior year of high school to do office work at the Employees Casualty Company of Dallas. They didn't want her to work. They wanted her to play basketball. She was a great basketball player. So she would join the company's semi-professional women's basketball team, the Golden Cyclones. Between 1930 and 32, she led the team to 2 finals in the national championship, and she was an All-American each season. At the 1932 Amateur Athletic Union Championship, she placed in 7 events, taking first place in 5, shot put, javelin, baseball throws, 80-meter hurdles, long jump. She tied for first in the high jump, finished 4th in the discus throw. There she is with the javelin. Her performances in the javelin throw, hurdles, and high jump qualified her to enter the 1932 Olympics, where she again broke world records in all 3 events. She won gold medals in the javelin, the hurdles, and despite clearing the same height as a top finisher in the high jump, she was awarded the silver medal because she went over the bar head first, which was a foul at the time. And she decided to take up golf. Hey, why not? And she's in the Fort Worth Women's Invitational, November of 1932. At the Texas Women's Amateur Championship the following April, she won the title. But you know, golf is one of these hoity-toity things, and she's off the streets. How could somebody who's not a member of my club win? So there were complaints from more socially polished members of the Texas Women's Golf Association, and the United States Association said, "You're ineligible. You can't compete as an amateur." Well, she regained her amateur standing in 1943. In those days, you were better thought of as being an amateur than a pro. And she would go, winning 17 consecutive tournaments, including the British World Amateur Championship. She was the first American to win it. She turned professional in 1947. 1948, she was one of the founders of the Lady Professional Golf Association because they were looking for a tournament so women could get paid. She was the LPGA's leading money winner between 1949 and 1951 when she developed cancer. But there's a dark side to Babe Dickerson Zaharis. This is the 1932 Olympic track and field women's team, United States. 2 African Americans are on this team, Tidy Pickett and Louise Stokes. And I'm just going to intercede here, break script for a second. I knew Marty Glickman, worked with Marty Glickman for his broadcast school in 1988. I knew Sam Stoller. They were the 2 Jews in Berlin in 1936 who were not allowed to compete because, as Marty told me, Avery Brundage, who was then running the United States Olympic Committee, didn't want two Jews winning a gold medal in front of Hitler and wanted to spare him the embarrassment, which is a whole different talk that I give. But anyway, but before Marty and Sam, there was Tidy and Louise Stokes. They were on the U.S. Olympic team in 1939. First African-American women ever on the team to participate. When Pickett ran the 800 meters hurdles in Berlin, she became the first African-American woman ever to compete in the Olympics. Except it should have happened in 1932, and it didn't. At the 1932 U.S. Olympic trials, Pickett competed in the 100-meter dash, winning her heat and placing third in the semifinals. She qualified for the finals, where she placed sixth. She was named to the American Olympic team as part of an 8-woman 4x100 meter relay pool. There is Tidy Pickett. Louise Stokes was also part of the relay pool. They're the first African American women to be selected for the Olympics. But both of them were left out of the Final Four women relay that ran at the Olympics, and there is Stokes. And why were they left out? Well, let's go back to Jim Crow America. Despite being and qualifying on the team, there was a problem. The coach, George Vreeland, selected only white women for the relay final. And then there was Babe, looking at her with the javelin throw. So, they're heading out to the Olympics. They're on the train. And the two women were sleeping in the train's bunking compartment that they shared. Stokes on the top, Pickett on the bottom. One of the most well-known women in sports, Babe Dietrichson, tossed a pitcher of ice water on the sleeping teammates. She was opposed to having Negro athletes on the team. Well, hey, Babe rules, right? When the Olympic team stopped in Denver, on the train on the way to Los Angeles, Stokes and Pickett were given a room separate from the rest of the team near a service area on an upper floor, and were served dinner in their rooms rather than at the banquet for the team. They sat and watched the American women set a gold record in the 400-meter relay and win the gold medal. They were replaced in the 4x100-meter relay by two white athletes, both of whom performed slower than Stokes and Pickett at the trials. Well, there's this part of the story. There was a novel written called Fast Girls, and Stokes is in this novel. And Tidy Pickett went on to become an educator, principal of a school in Chicago. And today that school is named after Tidy Pickett. And the other women have been forgotten from the 1932 game. 1936 Olympics. I do an hour and 10-minute talk about this. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of lucky in terms of talking about the German history of the Olympics, although they're horrible when you go back and look at 36 and 1972. But 36 Olympics, I knew Marty Glickman. I worked with him. 1988. I knew Sam Stoller. He ran the Milrose Games. So I knew those two from those games. And I also knew one other person because I interviewed her in 1993. Her name, Gretel Bergman. In America, Martha Lambert. Martha was her given name, and she married Dr. Bruno Lambert. We're going to give you the background, although I don't think this group needs to know much about the background of Nazi Germany and Jews. But 1933, Jews were systematically eliminated from German athletic associations. Gertrude Bergman went to train in England, but the Germans allowed her to participate. And she knew full well that, as she told me, that she wasn't going to make the Olympic team. So I meet her in 1993. There's Marv Schneider from the Associated Press, me, and Martha Lambert, Gretel Bergman. And we're at the New York Athletic Club. I don't know if you know anything about the history of the New York Athletic Club. It was highly anti-Semitic, as was the Downtown Athletic Club and other places, including not far from here, the Westchester Golf Course. And if you ever noticed, if you go down that street, I think it's 127, There's that golf course, and there's a course right next to them. Why? Because Jews couldn't join the Westchester Golf Club. So they said, we'll show you. We'll open our own golf club. And they did. So it's 1993.
Is that, my friend belongs there, is that still anti-Semitic?
No,
It is?
no,
I mean, she's not Jewish, but I was
no,
just.
no, I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was. All the golf courses here probably aren't anymore. And there are a lot of golf courses here in Westchester. But anyway, so we're going to New York Athletic Club. Marv and me. And Marv was about 25 years older than me. But we got along well. And he used to allow me to ask the first question, simply because I asked better first questions. Now, I'm going to ask you a question here. If you had the chance to talk to Gretel Bergman, knowing that she had been denied a place in the German team in 1936, and the Germans would sacrifice a chance to win a gold medal with this action, knowing her background completely, what would the first question be that you would ask her?
How sad are you about not making it?
Is she Jewish?
Well, she is Jewish.
Oh.
I only had a one-word question for her. Why? And she looked at me and she said, I needed to give my people hope. I needed to give them hope. I was the great white hope. You don't understand. You don't understand what was happening to us. Our businesses were taken away. We were displaced. All of our rights were stripped. And yet, I knew I was never going to race. I knew I was going to make that team. But I needed to give our people hope. Well, 1937, Gretel Bergman was able to obtain papers that allowed her to immigrate to the United States. Like all of the others who came from Germany, a member of my temple, Marty Stern, 1937, told me the same story. She landed in New York, $10 in her pocket. That's all the money that the Germans would allow her to take out of the country. She would end up working as a masseuse, a housemaid, and later a physical therapist. But she had a new life, and that's her husband, Dr. Bruno Lambert. They met, they were athletes, they fell in love, and he came with her with $10 in his pocket. She continued to participate in sports, won the 1937 and 1938 Women's High Jump Championships. She won the 1937 U.S. Shot Put Championship. She married Dr. Bruno Lambert in 1938. She received U.S. citizenship in 1942. And that was it. She was going to live the rest of her life in Forest Hills. She was sponsored in Forest Hills. And live a good life. You know, she didn't have to worry about herself. She fades into obscurity till her induction into the Jewish Hall of Fame at the Wingate Institute in Israel in 1980. Well, she has a legacy. People discovered her. That's why I interviewed her in 1993. She would get a medal, an honorary medal, at the Atlanta Summer Olympics in 1996, because she would have won medals in the Berlin Games. HBO, Russ Levinson, and Fuchs over at HBO said, we want to do a documentary on you, but we need you to go to Germany. I go to Germany, I don't buy Ford cars, I don't buy Mercedes-Benz, I'm not going back there. But we want you to. We want to celebrate your legacy there. And the two of them from HBO eventually got her to go back in 1999. Stadium in Latham, where she trained, was named after her. And there was the HBO special in 2004. If you could find it, I'd recommend it. It's good. It's called Hitler's Pawn, P-A-W-N, Hitler's Pawn. It's about her life trying out for the German team, her life coming to America, and her life with Dr. Lambert, and her life when people rediscovered her in 1980. It's definitely, if you can find it somewhere, it's worth the 60 minutes. Oh, she died at the age of 103 in 2017. There were actually two Jews who performed in 1936 for the Hitler in the Olympics. A guy by the name of Rudi Ball played hockey for Germany in the Munich Olympics in 1936, and he cut a deal with the Nazis. I'll play with you, let me and my family get out. And they did. The other was Helene Meyer. It's Helene Meyer. Her father was Jewish, so she was a non-Aryan. But the Germans allowed her to participate, even though she was a non-Aryan. And, you know, look at Hitler, right? Brown-haired guy with a mustache who looked strange, right? Certainly not in shape, but he had this view of a beautiful blonde with blue eyes and great, you know, physical physique and all for men and women. This is coming from a guy looking like Hitler, right? Anyway, so they allowed her to perform because she was one of the great fencers in the world. And she would win a silver medal, and like all the other Germans, she gave the Nazi Heil Hitler salute at the podium. No other Jewish athletes competed for Germany in the Summer Games. She fled to California. Not sure what the circumstances were because she never left behind any literature or correspondence. But she fled to California. She died at the age of 42. There are no film clips of her talking about the time. She never wrote a book. In 2000, when Sports Illustrated was a legitimate news sports magazine, not today, but there are many reasons for that today, Sports Illustrated named Meyer the greatest fencer of the 20th century. Some of you might have seen the movie A League of Their Own. Okay, some of you, based on a true story. Casey Candell, who's a coach in Major League Baseball now, played with the Montreal Expos in the mid-1990s. I got a chance to speak to him back then about his mother, who played in this professional baseball league. And I said to him, well, who taught you how to hit? He said, my mother. She's the best hitter in the family. Anyway, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Phil Wrigley, who ruined some of my teeth because he put out Juicy Fruit and spearmint gum. Wrigley's chewing gum. Chiclets, I think, was also him, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, Phil Wrigley was a Chicago Cubs owner, and he founded the league in 1943. Lasted until 1954, grew from a stopgap wartime entertainment to a professional baseball showcase for women players. Wrigley didn't do this because he was some ardent women's liver. He wanted to keep baseball going because he wanted to make some money off of baseball. And he thought, since the men are going off to World War II, that, well, let's do the bells of the game. But they were a lot better than Wrigley ever anticipated. High level of play, so much so by 1948, when the men came back from war and baseball opened up to Negro players and had a high level of play, these people were getting 1 million fans a year. 1948. People came to see them play. Short skirts, lipstick, that was part of the women's attire. Wrigley and Arthur Meyerhoff, the league's later owner, were not ardent women liberation backers. Their team names included the Milwaukee Chicks. I don't know if you could get away with the Milwaukee Chicks today. The Fort Wayne Daisies, the Rockford Peaches, and that was the league of their own. That was Madonna and Rosie O'Donnell. Gina Davis played for the Rockford Peaches. Players were required to embody the highest ideals of womanhood. And I was at a seniors group about 3 months ago doing, not this talk, but a talk on 1943 when the league was founded. And there's an 80-year-old woman sitting there, and I said, what are the ideals, highest ideals of womanhood? She gets up, she sticks out her chest like that, and said, these. Which I found funny. The other people are looking at her like, huh? The League of Their Own, or the League of Their Own. On the field, women put on lipstick, played in short skirts. Off the field, the girls endured mandatory charm school classes, forbidden to wear trousers or drink alcohol. Sounds like TV. TV didn't allow you to wear trousers unless you were Lucy. Who's going to tell Lucy you can't wear pants, right? The players here, talking to a guy who probably played in the in the gay 90s. This guy is old at that time, but this is only about 50 years later. So the players are listening to words of wisdom from a guy who played in the 1890s. Wrigley got the talent from the softball leagues, the amateur softball leagues in the Midwest for his Midwest League. During the early seasons, they used a large ball, almost softball size, and they pitched underhanded. But they were so good, they said, pitch regularly. Don't pitch with a softball, pitch with a regular baseball. And they were good. They were really, really good. But people lost interest in the league like they lost interest in going to the movies or other things because TV came into the home and you didn't have to go out to be entertained. After the All-American League folded, the players went back to playing recreational softball. But in the 1990s, there was a revival because of this documentary that was on PBS. Kelly Candell production. It's about her mother and others who played in the league. And Hollywood took note. He said, this sounds like a really good story, and let's make a movie starring Tom Hanks and Madonna and Gina Davis and Rosie O'Donnell. Obviously, this was a high-budget movie and it was called League of Their Own. And it was adopted from the documentary that you could have seen on PBS. Thea Gibson, great tennis player, victim of Jim Crow. Thea Gibson was clearly worthy of a U.S. Open invitation. Four-time national champion Alice Marble weighed in with a letter that appeared in the July 1950 issue of American Lawn Tennis magazine, noting that a committee member had told her Gibson would be judged on her performance in invitational tournaments, to which she wasn't invited. She responded, Alice Marble, Miss Gibson is over a very cunningly wrought barrel. She's not being judged by the yardstick of her ability, but by the fact that her pigmentation is somewhat different. She's a fellow tennis player, and as such deserving of the chance to prove herself. She got the chance. She won the 1957 Wimbledon Championship. Wilma Rudolph is an amazing story, an absolutely amazing story. She had polio as a kid. She was sick all the time. She was one of 22 children, constantly surrounded by support and care, which she needed because she was in poor health. She survived bouts of polio, scarlet fever. Her illness forced her to wear a brace on her legs. Her diagnosis was very bleak. My doctor told me I'd never walk again. My mother told me I would. I believed my mother. At the age of 6, in 1946, she began to hop on one leg. By 8, she could move around with a leg brace. At the age of 11, her mother discovered her playing basketball outside. She quickly turned to sports, became a natural athlete. There she is with her 3 gold medals from the 1960 Olympics. Amazing story, that alone, but there's more. She competed in the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games and won a bronze medal in the 4x100 relay. 4 years later, she headed to the 1960 Summer Olympics. Her performance in Rome cemented her as one of the greatest athletes of the 20th century. She won 3 gold medals, broke at least 3 world records. She became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in track and field at the same Olympics. But she grew up in Tennessee, and this is 1960. This is before the Civil Rights Act. This was in the middle of Jim Crow America. Townspeople in Clarksville, Tennessee want to honor her, really want to honor her. But this is a problem. She's Negro. Whites run the show. She said, well, I'll be part of this parade, but it better be desegregated. And it was. And in case there was any trouble, the National Guard was there. But it was desegregated. There she is, going down the main street in Clarksville, Tennessee. Her victory parade was the first racially integrated event ever held in the town. That night, there was a banquet townspeople held in her honor. It was the first time in Clarksville history that blacks and whites had ever gathered for the same event. My father-in-law used to go out with me when I went to work. And I used to go to work at places like the 21 Club or Gallagher's. And there would be big lunches. I was there to work, but he was there as a groupie. And he used to get people to take pictures of him with famous people, like her, Billie Jean King. Now, I was a professional, so I couldn't take a picture. But he took pictures. I got all these pictures with him and these people. Billie Jean King is one of my favorite people. She's great. Ever sit down with her for a half hour, she will have you laughing, she will have you thinking, she will have you talking. She's great, you know. Anyway, is she a civil rights pioneer, yes or no? Is she a civil rights pioneer?
She wrote some.
Yeah, she was a civil rights pioneer. Is she a civil rights pioneer? She is. Nah, she's not up there with Martin Luther King, not up there with John Lewis.
Right.
But her role in the civil rights movement for women in the 1960s and 70s is clearly defined. She pushed for equal prize money in the men's and women's tennis matches after winning the 1972 US Open, and she was paid $15,000 less than the men's champion Ilie Nastase. She's threatened to sit out the 1973 US Open if the prize money was not equaled by the following year. 1973, the US Open knuckled down and gave her the same prize money, or women the same prize money as men. Her aggressive stance on equal rights started in the 1960s. She's part of a sea change which culminated in getting the Title IX law passed. Title IX of 1972 educational amendments changed women's sports and opportunities for women in educational opportunities. She wasn't the only one. This is Catherine Switzer, but she entered the Boston Marathon in 1967 as Kay Switzer. She was the daughter of a major in the United States Army, so failure was never really an option for her. While studying at Syracuse University, one of her coaches told her that, she told them that she's going to run in the Boston Marathon. Oh, you can't do that. Fragile woman. You can't run the Boston Marathon. So she trained in secret and entered the race. She's part of the weaker sex, right? If women are part of the weaker sex, how come they outlive men? But, as the old comedian who lived on New Hempstead Road up in Rockland County said, because we want it that way. Myron Cohn. You remember Myron Cohn? Anyway, Big Tom Miller is her boyfriend. And this guy, Jock Semple, runs the Boston Marathon, or is the organizer of the Boston Marathon. And he's trying to get her to push her face down into the asphalt. He's 6'2", weighs 235 pounds, played football, and also was a United States track and field star, ranked nationally in the hammer throw. So Jock is trying to knock her over, and Big Tom Miller knocks over Jock Semple. And they were worried that Semple would press charges against them, even though he tried to harm Kay Switzer, or Catherine Switzer. The weaker sex, frail and all, Switzer finished with a time of approximately 4 hours and 20 minutes. That's Patsy T. Mink. And in June, I do a talk every year about Title IX because it was passed by me, Richard Nixon. January 23rd, 1972, or signed into law. Patsy Mink, Edith Green is the next one up. Congresswomen, Patsy from Hawaii, and Edith Green from Oregon. And there was a major ally, Republican Senator Ted Stevens, and Democratic Senator from Indiana, Birch Bayh. Stevens was from Alaska. Those are the four people who pushed through the Title IX legislation. Patsy Mink was elected the first female president of the student body at Maui High School, that time territory of Hawaii, valedictorian of her class, 1944. She played basketball, half court, because full court would be too taxing for 17 and 18 women high school students. So, Title IX, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation, be denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. On June 23rd, 1972, President Richard Nixon signed the Title IX legislation into law that was designed to give women an equal opportunity at getting an education, not sports, education in American colleges and universities with men. Also changed women's sports. Men no longer got 95% of the dollars earmarked for sports, and that caused, or is causing, friction in the men's teams coaching fraternities. A good number of those coaches think Title IX has taken away their ability to get the best athletes for their teams because they can't spend scholarship money solely for men's teams, although that's changed with marketing partners giving athletes money so they can get presumably the best athletes if they have the right marketing partner. The battle of Title IX legislation in women's sports is still being fought, with some coaches and athletic directors crying foul, saying they have to cut men's sports programs to keep women's programs to stay in compliance with Title IX rules. Ann Myers beat me out for a trustee spot at a college, a board of trustees, and I said, give it to her anyway. She's more qualified than I am. Anyway, she became the first ever female athlete to receive a 4-year scholarship to a university. She signed with UCLA in 1974, 2 years after Title IX. 1979, she became the first woman to sign the National Basketball Association contract with the Indiana Pacers. She failed to make the team. Bernice Guerra was a Queens housewife. Queens housewife. Around 1965, she has a talk with her husband. She's bored. She's missing something in life. She doesn't know what she's missing, but she knows she's missing something, and she wants to do more with her life. So she talks to her husband, and he says, well, what do you like? I like baseball. Baseball? How do you get a job in baseball? She decides to become an umpire. 1969, Bernice Guerra received a contract from the National Association of Professional Baseball Leagues to work in the Class A short season New York Penn League. But Guerra received a telegram from then NAPBL President Philip Payton informing her that her contract was disapproved and invalid. Why? She's a woman. The baseball executive, Ed Doherty, claimed that umpires needed to be 21 to 35 years old, a minimum of 5 foot 10 inches tall, and weigh at least 170 pounds. She was 38, 5'2", weighed 126 pounds. Guerra even had prior experience umpiring for the National Baseball Congress in Bridgetown, New Jersey, as well as in the, as she quoting her, recreational programs in the slums. And there she is. On June 24, 1972, Bernice Guerra, after 3 years of court battles, got onto a minor league baseball field. She umpired the Class A minor league game between the Geneva Rangers and the Auburn Phillies of the New York Penn League. She was greeted at her hotel with protests after getting her assignments. These guys are showing up and they're making noise and they're picketing and they're throwing rocks at lights, knocking lights out, all because she's going to be an umpire. Think of the other people who are near her in that hotel. Well, she gets on the field and she's berated by the Auburn manager, Nolan Campbell, for reversing a double play call. She resigned between games of a doubleheader, citing lack of cooperation from her fellow umpires. Campbell told her, "You should be in the kitchen peeling potatoes." She quit. The Now people said, "You can't quit." But she said she couldn't deal with it. Bernice would always say, "I can beat them in the courts, but I can't beat them on the field," her husband said. Well, getting back to Billie Jean King, you've come a long way, baby, to get to where you are today. You've got your own cigarette, baby. You've come a long way. Well, the first women's tour couldn't get sponsors. The men on Madison Avenue didn't want it. Not at all. First women's tour never could get a sponsor, despite the 1964 Surgeon General's report that cigarette smoking was harmful to smokers' health. The only company willing to put up money for the women was Philip Morris, Virginia Slims brand. The tour took the money. As Billie Jean King told me, it was blood money, but they had to take it. The Virginia Slims circuit was formed in 1970. 9 Players rebelled against the United States Lawn Tennis Association due to the widespread inequity between the amount of prize money paid to male tennis players and female tennis players. An unsanctioned Houston tournament was scheduled. The tennis establishment didn't like it. They threatened to bar the renegade players from the majors. Renegade players like her, Billie Jean King. The 9 were planning to play in the unsanctioned Houston tournament, and they put their careers on the line. Billie Jean King, Rosie Casals, Nancy Ritchie, Peaches Barkowitz, Kirsty Pidgeot, Valerie Ziegenfuss, Julie Heldman, Carrie Melville Reed, Judy Taggart Dalton. They played, the establishment backed down. Billie Jean King defended taking the money in 1983. I believe in the free enterprise system. It's up to the women. It's up to the woman herself to make that choice, whether to smoke or not. The most important thing is we are well informed, and we make our own decisions. Ellen Merlo was the director of marketing communications for Philip Morris USA, which makes Virginia Slims, and she noted that the company had earlier sponsored the tour from '71 to '78. When we get involved in any promotion, it's obviously to create a greater visibility for our brand name. But we never ever ask the player to endorse our product. Not true. By stepping out in the court with all the signage around there, you're endorsing it. This is my buddy Shelley Saltman, the late Shelley Saltman. Put down the phone. I know your ears are burning. He used to have this knack of calling me every time I was in the car. And then a couple of weeks ago, I'm doing a talk, and I bring up his name, and I get dinged on the phone, and it's like, after 4 years, he found me. How did he find me? Put down the phone. 15, 20 years will tell. The battle of the sexes. Billie Jean King against Bobby Riggs. Shelley was the promoter. He had a lot of stories. It's September 20th, 1973. The battle of the sexes. More than 30,000 fans filled the Houston Astrodome with celebrities like Salvador Dali mingling with what appeared to be aliens wearing tuxedos, and Howard Cosell is there, and he is going to introduce Cleopatra. There she is, Billie Jean King is Cleopatra with 4 bare stomach athletes from the track and field team from Rice University in Houston. And he's also going to introduce Bobby Riggs, the pig, the male chauvinist pig who has been sponsored by Sugar Daddy. King enters the court with 4 in the Cleopatra entrance on gold glitter, while Riggs comes in the rickshaw. Shelley had to find the rickshaw, flocked by a bevy of Bobby's bosomy buddies. I said, how'd you pick them out? He said, we look for big busted women who wear tight stuff, who would basically fawn all over Bobby Riggs. They exchanged, excuse me for laughing, I'm thinking when Shelley was telling me the story. Shelley, by the way, was beaten up by Evel Knievel. He was the guy Evel Knievel beat up, never got the $13 million judgment against Knievel by a jury. Anyway, then they exchanged pregame gifts of baby pig for the chauvinist Riggs, a giant sugar daddy lollipop for King. Years later, I said to Billie Jean King, what was the point? He was 55 years old. If you beat him, you beat a 55-year-old guy. If he wins, he beats a 29-year-old woman in the prime of her career. And she said, I thought about that. Kind of silly, but she got paid a lot of money for it. But this is what she told me. Remember, Title IX had just passed. I really didn't want it to be weakened. I thought with Margaret Clark losing it to Bobby Riggs prior, it would be a good chance for some people to start jumping on the bandwagon to weaken Title IX, further tour to hurt women's sports, the women's movement. As soon as I found out Margaret had lost, I knew I was definitely going to play Bobby Riggs. I did not have a choice. And Howard was there, and he asked Bobby Riggs this question. Why are you going to win? And Bobby Riggs responded, I'll tell you why I'll win. She's a woman, and they don't have emotional stability. They became really good friends. Billie Jean King helped support Bobby Riggs in his last years. And they went on tour and they did kind of things together, including being on The Odd Couple. Something new in 1973 as well. November 7th, 1973, New Jersey becomes the first state to allow women to play, or girls to play, Little League Baseball. Tennis stars that came after Billie Jean King included Chrissy Everett, Martina Navratilova, Serena Williams, Venus Williams. Nadia Comaneci was the star of the 1976 Olympics. Remember, the Olympics that de Coubertin wanted to get rid of all the women. Well, she's the one who really got women hooked to watch the Olympics because of gymnastics.
Romania.
Romania. Perfect score of 10. After the game, she was named the hero of the socialist labor in Romania. The song used to accompany her floor exercises was retitled Nadia's Thing, The Young and Restless, became an international hit, earning a Grammy record in 1977. Nancy Lopez became the face of golf. She won 9 tournaments. 1978 was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Won the Barry Trophy for lowest scoring average, LPGA Rookie of the Year, Player of the Year, Associated Press Female Athlete of the Year. Post-1972, almost every female athlete in the U.S. has benefited from one way or another from Title IX. 1996 U.S. Olympic team was supposed to be the springboard to women's professional basketball, and it was. The NBA sponsored a women's league, the WNBA. They had stars too, Cheryl Swoops, but it became a financial drain for the NBA. There were 2 leagues that started after those Olympics, the WNBA and the American Basketball League, which paid more money. NBA was very serious about including women in the business. They hired Violet Palmer as a referee, 1997. The American Basketball League offered players higher salaries, but that was their undoing. They didn't have the money. And they ended operations December 22nd, 1998. Brandy Chastain, I once asked her, I said, how come women's sports are struggling? She said, we need a good old girls network. Girls to put up money. But how do you put up money? Well, you got to become CEOs, and you got to run companies. And that's still a problem in many ways. The national women's soccer teams got people interested in soccer, but in terms of women's leagues in the United States, it just hasn't happened yet. But in 2003, women's soccer was growing in popularity with the National Women's Soccer League. Some of the great athletes today, Katie Ledecky, Lindsey Vonn, Danica Patrick, Ronda Rousey, and Megan Rapinoe, who has been fighting for equal pay in soccer for years with the men. Equal pay. We win, they don't, pay us equally. 2016, 5 senior members of the U.S. World Cup winning team filed a complaint against U.S. Soccer for wage discrimination. All 28 squad members filed discrimination lawsuit March 2019. The bid for equal pay, which they sought $66 million in damages, was dismissed by a court in May 2022. Led to an appeal, and that appeal got to the U.S. Soccer Federation, and they would offer identical contracts to men and women in an attempt to resolve the pay gender dispute in September 2021. The women got a ticker tape parade after winning the World Cup. Equal pay, equal pay, equal pay, equal pay, equal pay. February 22nd, 2022, the players received $22 million direct payment to be distributed in the manner proposed by the U.S. WNTA players, approved by a federal court. U.S. Soccer committed to pay the women equal to men. National Women's Soccer League franchises are now selling for $50 million. But it's still a struggle with money. That's Brittany Griner. She was arrested in Russia last year. She was vaping. This is a problem for the WNBA. Most of their players play overseas, where they can make a lot more money than playing here in the United States. And they're trying to figure out, well, we don't want another Brittany Griner problem. How do we do it? She was arrested February 17th, 2022 at the Moscow airport. Russian custom officials found 4 vape cartridges containing cannabis oil in her luggage. She was convicted of drug possession and smuggling. She had a 9-year sentence in a penal colony. She was involved in a prisoner swap December 8th, 2022. She's playing in Russia, because that's where the money was. Kathy Engelbert is the WNBA commissioner. 2023, for this season, right now, of the 144 league players, 67 are playing abroad right now. WNBA players receive low pay compared to the millions that they can make playing overseas. Engelbert would like to change that, have the players stay home, but there's not enough money around the WNBA for that to happen. Which is why Brandi Chastain said, we need a good old girls network. Thank you so much. Any questions, any comments?
you.
It's
Good,
your
thank you.
turn. Time. Yes.